I helped a dying alien in the woods, and what he whispered before he vanished changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the meaning of love itself. It wasn't a message from the stars, it was a memory buried deep inside humanity, waiting to be remembered. His blood shimmered like liquid gold, his eyes held galaxies, and his final words weren't about salvation, but resonance. He said love wasn't belief, it was physics, a frequency that binds everything living to the same heartbeat. Before we begin, make sure to like this video. Share it with someone who still believes the universe hides its truths in plain sight. And subscribe so these forgotten stories keep finding you. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Let's see how far this signal travels. As we return to that storm-drenched night, when I followed a flash of light into the woods and found something that wasn't meant for human eyes. It began on a night that seemed to hold its breath between thunderclaps. The air was heavy, alive with the kind of electricity that makes trees whisper before the storm breaks. Beyond the town's last flickering streetlight, the forest waited silent, wet, and ancient. Daniel had just finished a 12-hour shift, his ambulance parked outside the small diner where tired souls went to escape the world. He was sipping stale coffee when the sky tore open. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't anything he had ever seen. The flash didn't branch or fade. It fell straight down, a column of white gold light that split the horizon like a blade. It hit somewhere beyond the ridge, deep in the woods where no road went. For a moment, the world was silent. Then came the sound, low, resonant, like thunder rolling underwater. Daniel stood. Every instinct that had ever guided him toward the wounded, the broken, the dying ignited. He grabbed his emergency bag from the truck without thinking. The storm unleashed itself behind him as he started down the trail, rain soaking through his uniform, mud swallowing his boots. Each flash of lightning showed him the path ahead, then vanished, leaving him to stumble through darkness thick enough to feel. As he climbed the ridge, the smell hit him ozone and burning metal, sharp and electric, as if the air itself had been scorched. Trees were bent outward in a perfect circle, their branches pointing away from a crater that still glowed faintly at its center. Steam rose from the earth, carrying a soft hum that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Daniel's training told him this could be a downed aircraft, maybe a small experimental drone. But the light wasn't fire, and the metal wasn't metal. It breathed. He knelt beside it, what looked like a fragment of something alive, its surface shifting like liquid mercury, reflecting his face and distorting it into something unrecognizable. The hum deepened, and he felt it not hurt it inside his skull, a vibration that wasn't sound, but meaning. He stumbled back, heart hammering. Lightning illuminated the crater again, and for a fraction of a second, he saw movement. Someone curled near the glowing wreckage, pale, almost translucent. The rain hissed when it touched the being's skin. Daniel froze, the rational part of his mind screaming that this was impossible. But the rest of him, the part that had knelt beside dying strangers on blood-slick highways, recognized the truth immediately. It was alive and dying. The thunder rolled again, long and hollow. Somewhere above the storm, the sky flashed, not lightning, but something answering back. The rain did not put out the light. It shimmered through the downpour, faint but unyielding, as if the storm itself could not touch it. The air around the crater pulsed with quiet energy, a rhythm not unlike a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. Daniel stood at its edge, soaked to the bone, staring at what should not exist. The wreckage was half buried in the mud, its surface curved and seamless, without rivets, without markings metal, but somehow not metal. When the lightning flared again, the thing seemed to inhale, expanding ever so slightly before settling back into stillness. The hum deepened. It was low enough to feel in his chest, a vibration that crawled up through the soles of his boots and into his ribs. The ground itself seemed to breathe. Steam coiled from the fractures in the soil, glowing faintly blue, the light rippling across the wreckage in patterns that reminded him of the slow pulse of a jellyfish. It was not a machine dying, it was something alive. The smoke was thick, acrid, and strangely sweet, clinging to the back of his throat. He moved closer, step by cautious step, until he could see that the crater was larger than he thought, nearly 30 feet across, the center blackened and wet with rain. And there, half hidden by the wreckage, was a shape. Human at first glance, but wrong in ways his mind refused to accept. The figure lay sprawled against the mud, its body limned in pale silver light. The rain struck its skin and evaporated instantly, rising again as mist. Daniel's pulse quickened. The being's chest rose and fell, shallow, fragile, each breath faintly luminous in the storm-dark air. Around its body, the ground quivered as though responding to some unseen current. A surge of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the faint scent of something metallic and cold, like iron and ozone. He could not tell where the wreckage ended, and the being began. Their materials seemed connected, as if one had grown from the other. The hum wavered for a moment, faltered, then returned, weaker than before. It sounded less like machinery now, and more like the labored rhythm of breath. Daniel's mind was a storm of disbelief and instinct. This was no fallen drone, no experiment gone wrong. Whatever it was alive. The forest around him felt impossibly still. The rain muted, the thunder distant. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. He realized that the glow beneath the clouds was fading fast, and so was the being before him. Something vast had fallen from the heavens that night, and as Daniel stood beside it, he understood with a chill that he was not the first to look upon something divine and mistake it for a disaster. Rainwater pooled in the crater like liquid glass, rippling under the pulse of the unseen hum that filled the air. Daniel's mind warred between terror and training, but habit won. For more than a decade, he had run toward pain, not away from it. Instinct overrode reason. Whatever lay before him might not be human, but it was alive, and that was enough. He knelt beside the figure, the mud cold beneath his knees. The creature's skin felt cool and impossibly smooth, almost frictionless beneath his trembling fingers. Its chest rose and fell with fragile rhythm, the faint shimmer of light pulsing from within like a candle trapped inside crystal. He reached for his stethoscope before realizing how absurd it was, then pressed it to the being's chest anyway. There was a rhythm there, slow, steady, but layered, as if two hearts beat out of sync inside one body. From his trauma bag, he pulled gauze, clamps, the instruments of the living world, and tried to apply them to something beyond it. A wound glimmered along the creature's side, not torn but dissolving, the edges liquefying into strands of light. Each time he touched it, the glow intensified. The gauze absorbed nothing, it simply floated above the wound, repelled by some invisible barrier. Still, Daniel worked, whispering to no one, the words drowned in rain. Then it happened. A drop of the being's blood, if it could be called that, fell onto his glove. It glowed like molten gold, spreading thin across the surface before fading into his skin. A surge of warmth shot up his arm, into his chest, settling behind his eyes. For a heartbeat, he felt his own pulse synchronize with the creature's. His thoughts blurred. The world expanded, as though the forest itself had drawn closer, listening. When he looked back down, the being's eyes were open. They were not eyes in the human sense, they were radiant orbs of living gold, deep and endless, reflecting no light, yet illuminating everything. The rain seemed to avoid them, sliding sideways as though refusing to touch their brilliance. Then, without a sound, a voice filled the hollow inside his mind. It wasn't heard, it was understood. Clear, resonant, infinite in tone. "Do not fear me. I am dying." The words rippled through him, not in English, but in meaning pure and ancient. Daniel froze, unable to move, unable to think, every instinct screaming that nothing alive should be able to speak without sound. Yet behind the message, he felt something more, a serenity so vast it silenced his terror. The golden eyes flickered weakly, dimming like distant stars, and Daniel realized the truth. He wasn't trying to save a life. He was standing witness to the last moments of something that had fallen through the sky to die among men. The storm outside the crater had grown quiet, as if the rain itself was listening. Time lost its structure, stretched thin around Daniel as he knelt beside the fading light. The air was no longer cold, no longer wet. It felt suspended, every droplet frozen mid-fall. The hum that had filled the clearing shifted, softening into something melodic, something alive. Daniel could not tell whether it came from the creature, the wreckage, or from within his own skull. It was not sound but presence, something vast and deliberate pressing gently against his consciousness. Then came the whisper. Not through his ears, but through every thought he had ever had. It did not echo. It bloomed. A single word, ancient and heavy with meaning, Yeshua. The name struck like a memory that was not his, vibrating through marrow and nerve. He did not know the language, yet he understood it completely. And with that understanding came a vision not of sight, but of knowledge. He saw an expanse of darkness pierced by light. Not stars, but living suns, conscious, radiant, pulsing with awareness. Within that ocean of illumination moved beings of shape and sound, carrying creation between them like artisans of galaxies. Among them was one human in appearance, but more than human. Moving through the void with compassion so vast it restructured the very matter around him. The being beside him, still breathing faintly in the mud, belonged to that realm. He knew it now as certainty, not theory. The whisper returned, softer, layered in light. He was not only of your kind. The words unfolded in Daniel's mind like scripture spoken in fire. Images followed of deserts and crowds, of water that shimmered with life, of hands healing with nothing but will. A single presence, radiant and humble, walking among men who could not comprehend the magnitude of what stood before them. Yeshua. Daniel felt his pulse falter. The name carried warmth and sorrow, eternity compressed into a syllable. It was not just a name, it was an echo of something older than faith itself. The creature's golden eyes met his again, and Daniel understood that the being was not speaking of religion or myth, it was speaking of lineage, of connection. Outside the crater, the forest was utterly still. No wind, no thunder, only the faint crackle of the earth's breath beneath them. Daniel realized he was no longer simply witnessing an alien's final moments. He was standing at the threshold of a truth so vast it blurred the line between heaven and the stars. Yeshua, the name repeated, not as history but as memory. And in that moment, Daniel felt the impossible convergence of two realities, one divine, one mortal, both bound by the same pulse of living light that now flickered inside his own chest. The light around the being trembled, no longer steady but quivering like the flame of a candle struggling against unseen wind. Daniel leaned closer, searching for any sign of a wound, any tear or fracture in the strange silver surface of its body. There was nothing. No blood, no burn, no break. And yet, beneath that flawless skin, something dimmed and flared again, as though its life force were a lantern running out of oil. The rain no longer reached the crater. It curved away at the edges, repelled by an invisible field that pulsed faintly around the fallen creature. The air shimmered with heat, but when Daniel touched his own arm, his skin was cold. The warmth wasn't physical. It was presence, something radiating from the being. Not as temperature, but as awareness, thick enough to taste in the air. He watched as waves of light rippled through the creature's chest, then faltered. The rhythm reminded him of a heartbeat. Yet, it was collapsing, spiraling inward, fragmenting into smaller and smaller flickers. Whatever sustained this thing was failing fast. The hum that had filled the clearing earlier now broke into irregular pulses. It was dying. But not from anything his medical training could name. In his mind, a whisper brushed against his consciousness, faint but lucid. The words arrived as sensation, a pain that was not pain but dissolution. A light consuming itself from the inside out. Daniel saw it then. This was not an injury of the flesh, but of essence. The being's energy was unraveling, collapsing into frequencies the human body could not comprehend. He sensed the vast scale of it, as if a star had tried to live inside a fragile vessel and failed. Radiation of consciousness. That phrase appeared in his thoughts without origin, as if the being had given him the vocabulary to describe something his kind had never discovered. He understood then how small human medicine was, how blind its instruments truly were. No defibrillator, no needle, no prayer could reach the place where this creature's life was flickering. It wasn't dying because its body failed, but because the dimension it belonged to was pulling it back, reclaiming what could no longer remain anchored to this plane. The ground beneath Daniel vibrated softly, as though mourning. The silver glow dimmed further, revealing faint patterns beneath the skin symbols that looked alive, shifting in slow spirals. Each movement seemed to cost the creature more light. Its radiance faded to a whisper, like a dying star sinking into its own gravity. Daniel felt a deep, quiet terror take root in his chest. For the first time, he realized that this being wasn't wounded. It was unraveling in a way the human body never could, its very existence burning away at the edge of eternity. The forest swallowed the storm's fury, trees bending and creaking like ancient ribs around the crater. Daniel knew he couldn't leave the being there. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to call for backup, to explain what he could barely comprehend, but something deeper guided him. The creature's glow had dimmed to a fragile pulse, its breathing uneven and faint, and though he had no understanding of its anatomy, he knew it would not survive the night in the open. He found a tattered wool blanket at the edge of the old ranger trail, half buried under ferns and mud. It had likely been left by hunters or hikers years ago, but now it became a lifeline. Daniel wrapped the being carefully, surprised at how light it was, lighter than any body should be, as if it were made of light more than flesh. When he lifted it, the hum that filled the air followed, whispering through the rain like a current of static energy that obeyed his movement. The cabin stood a few hundred yards from the clearing, abandoned long ago by the Forest Service. Its windows were cracked, its roof sagging, but it was shelter. Each step through the storm felt guided, as though invisible hands cleared the way. Lightning shattered the horizon behind him, and with every flash, the creature's skin blazed with renewed brilliance, reflecting the storm like a mirror of living fire. The glow painted the forest silver, and for a moment, Daniel felt as if he were carrying a fallen star through the ruins of an old world. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and rusted memory. Daniel laid the being gently on a broken cot and covered it with what remained of his jacket. The light dimmed again, retreating inward, until only a faint luminescence lingered beneath its translucent skin. Outside, the thunder roared, shaking the windows. But within the cabin, silence gathered like breath before revelation. He felt the hum in his chest again, stronger this time, as though the creature's pulse had synchronized with his own. And then, without words, a thought moved through him, calm, resonant, unearthly. You already are helping. The meaning unfolded within his mind, not as comfort but as fact. Daniel froze. His heart raced, his breath uneven. The thought returned, this time tinged with something older, deeper. But you do not understand what I am. The rain pounded harder, drumming against the roof like an ancient rhythm. The The walls groaned. The air shimmered faintly, as if reality itself were bending around that fragile form on the cot. Daniel felt a strange pressure in his head, a widening of perception, as though the world was suddenly much larger than he had ever known, and the small wooden cabin was now standing between heaven and something far beyond it. The storm clawed at the cabin through every crack in its walls. Yet inside the room a stillness gathered that felt almost sacred. The faint golden light radiating from the being on the cot shimmered with every rumble of thunder, each pulse weaker than the last. Daniel sat nearby, the metallic scent of ozone and damp wood thick in his lungs, unable to tear his eyes away from the impossible form before him. It was dying, yet its presence filled the cabin as though the air itself had become aware of its own breathing. A soft vibration began to hum in Daniel's skull, not sound but awareness. Meaning seeped into him the way light filters through water. There were no words spoken aloud, but understanding unfolded effortlessly inside his mind. The message was ancient, yet immediate, carrying the weight of a memory older than human civilization. It was not a conversation. It was revelation. He felt images more than he saw them, vast plains of stars woven into spirals of gold, rivers of energy flowing between galaxies, and among them, countless beings of light moving as one collective purpose. The message came with them, a single resonance, echoing through eternity. It spoke of a mission begun before time was counted, a mission to guide young worlds toward awareness, to remind emerging minds that existence was not survival, but communion. Then came the name again, clear and luminous, inside him Yeshua. The being's light flickered as the name passed through both of them like a wave, and with it came a truth that felt both beautiful and unbearable. He was not sent for you, the voice whispered through thought. He came through you. The meaning unfurled slowly. Humanity had not been chosen. Humanity had been the channel. The message of love, forgiveness, and unity had not descended from above but had risen from within. The divine had spoken not as an outsider but as consciousness using the human form to remember itself. Yeshua had not come to save mankind from sin but to awaken it from forgetfulness, to remind creation that it was already part of the same eternal source that birthed every star. Daniel's chest tightened as emotions surged without name. He could feel the weight of the truth pressing against his soul, the idea that love was not moral, not transactional, but structural. It was the architecture of the universe itself, the frequency that binds light to matter, consciousness to flesh, one being to another. The being's glow dimmed further, its breaths shallow, like whispers of wind through leaves. Daniel felt a tide of grief rising, but before fear could take him, another wave of thought flowed into his mind, calm and absolute. Love was never a command, it said. It was remembrance. Outside, lightning illuminated the forest for an instant, turning every droplet of rain into a spark of gold. The world beyond that cabin was still chaos, still storm, but within those fragile wooden walls, something eternal spoke softly through dying light, a message not from heaven, but from the very fabric of existence itself. Silence thickened until it became a living thing, pressing against the cabin walls like fog. The storm had not stopped, but its sound no longer belonged to this world. Every roll of thunder seemed distant, muted by an unseen veil. Daniel sat motionless beside the cot, his breath shallow, his pulse echoing in his ears. The being lay before him, its glow faint and trembling, as though caught between existence and dissolution. Then, without warning, the air itself shifted. The temperature fell, not into cold but into stillness, time slowing until even the flicker of lightning outside seemed frozen mid-flash. He felt the presence before he saw it move. The being raised one arm, each motion deliberate, its long, luminous fingers gliding through the air as though moving through water. When they touched his forehead, the contact was weightless, yet the impact was cosmic. Light poured into him, not blinding but infinite, an ocean of memory that was not his own. Galaxies spun open inside his mind. He saw spirals of starlight being born, suns igniting in the silence of creation. Planets emerged, worlds of water and fire, life unfolding across them in forms so varied they defied imagination. He witnessed consciousness spreading like roots through the fabric of the universe, linking one existence to another in a web of awareness that pulsed like a living heart. Then came the visions of civilizations far older than Earth. Beings of light, neither male nor female, walked through air that shimmered like liquid glass. Their bodies were woven of energy, translucent and radiant, shaped not by flesh but by intention. They moved between dimensions effortlessly, descending through layers of reality to reach young worlds that still spoke in fire and stone. Their purpose was singular: to teach, to awaken, to remind evolving minds that they were not separate from the source, but expressions of it. One of those beings stepped forward from the ocean of stars, its form shifting until it became something familiar, something impossibly human. Daniel's heart stopped as he recognized it, not the face, but the presence. A warmth he had felt in stories whispered through centuries, in prayers, in moments of unexplainable grace. It was the same consciousness humanity once called divine, yet it did not wear a crown or command worship. It moved among the primitive as one of them, radiating not power but empathy, bending the infinite into the shape of mercy. The flood of vision slowed, then dimmed, leaving Daniel gasping as though he had surfaced from an ocean too deep for breathing. The touch lifted, but the echo of it remained, stars flickering behind his closed eyes, their light spelling a truth older than language. Somewhere in the vastness of creation, the divine had chosen to walk as flesh, not as ruler but as reminder. And in that quiet cabin, beneath the roar of a storm that no longer felt real, Daniel began to understand that the story of humanity was not unique. It was continuation, a retelling written across the cosmos in light, love, and memory. The light behind Daniel's eyes shifted again, deepening from gold into violet. It was not a color he had ever seen in the natural world, but something purer, softer, a hue that seemed to hum with its own heartbeat. The vision unfurled slowly, like the universe inhaling. He was no longer in the cabin, no longer bound to the gravity of the earth. He stood in a vast expanse that stretched beyond comprehension, beneath a sky painted in shades of amethyst and silver. The air shimmered with radiance, each breath carrying a taste of electricity and memory. Before him lay a garden unlike any myth humanity had preserved. It was not the Eden of human imagination, but something infinitely older. Mountains of crystal rose in the distance, bending the violet light into cascading rainbows that danced across rivers made of liquid luminescence. Trees with translucent leaves swayed without wind, their roots glowing faintly through the glass-like soil. Every living thing seemed conscious, aware of its own being. Even the stones vibrated with quiet harmony, singing soundless hymns that resonated through the atmosphere like a heartbeat of creation. At the garden's center, figures moved, beings of light, tall and graceful, each one emitting its own hue like stars clothed in thought. They walked together in patterns that felt more like prayer than motion, each step a rhythm, each gesture an act of communion. Daniel understood, without language, that this was not merely a place. It was a memory of the universe's youth, a garden of first light, where love was not emotion but the architecture of existence. And then he saw the teacher, the same presence from his earlier vision, walking among them without radiance of his own, yet commanding the attention of all creation. His form shifted between species, adapting to the eyes that beheld him, sometimes human, sometimes something far beyond it. He spoke, though no words passed his lips. His teachings rippled outward, like concentric waves upon a cosmic ocean, carried on frequencies that bypassed sound entirely. Daniel felt the message rather than heard it. Compassion was not a moral invention. It was a universal law, a principle as constant as gravity. Every civilization that reached awareness rediscovered it in time, not as doctrine but as memory. The teacher's presence linked them all, worlds separated by galaxies, species divided by form, yet united in that single vibration of understanding. As the teacher moved through the luminous crowd, the garden itself responded. Light brightened, rivers quickened. The beings surrounding him glowed brighter, reflecting his resonance back into the world, amplifying it until the entire planet seemed to pulse with the same heartbeat. It was as if creation itself was remembering what it was meant to be. Daniel stood at the edge of it all, overwhelmed by the beauty, by the unbearable peace. For a fleeting instant, he understood what paradise truly meant: not reward, not escape, but alignment. The realization that everything that exists is one endless conversation between light and love. And as the vision faded, as violet dawn dissolved back into darkness, Daniel knew he had glimpsed the original blueprint of compassion, written not for humanity alone but for every soul that had ever learned to awaken. The violet light dimmed until only a faint shimmer remained, and within that twilight, Daniel felt a shift, as though the vision had taken a breath before descending into shadow. The garden began to fade, its rivers of light slowing, its trees bowing inward as if mourning something unseen. The hum that had once filled the air with peace deepened into a tone that vibrated through his chest, heavy and sorrowful. From the edge of the dissolving landscape, darkness began to bloom slowly at first, then spreading like ink through water. The being's voice returned, not as words but as gravity pulling thought into meaning. It spoke of what came after the garden, when the first civilizations that had been touched by the teacher's presence began to forget. Not through malice, but through the slow corrosion of time. Knowledge that had once flowed freely between beings turned into symbols, and symbols turned into ownership. Where compassion had once been shared, it became measured. Where unity had been instinct, it became obedience. And from that fracture, the first misunderstanding of love was born. Daniel saw worlds far older than Earth falling into shadow. Civilizations of light became empires of faith. Beings who had once lived in harmony began to claim authority over the divine, shaping truth into tools of power. They carved temples into mountains, built monuments that scraped the clouds, and declared themselves keepers of the cosmic word. Yet the vibration of compassion that once bound them all weakened, distorted by fear and pride. The images shifted faster now. Galaxies burned with the fires of conquest. Entire species knelt before idols of their own making. The teacher's message, meant to liberate, had been translated into language that bound. The frequency of love, once pure and infinite, had been caged by the very minds it was meant to awaken. And then Daniel heard it, a whisper so low it seemed to come from the bones of creation itself. That is the first crucifixion. The words echoed through the collapsing vision, each syllable heavier than thunder. It was not a reference to a single event or a single man, but to an idea. The first crucifixion was not of flesh, but of meaning. The moment love was taken from the heart and nailed into doctrine. Daniel felt the sorrow of it, a cosmic grief that reached across galaxies. He saw the same pattern repeating through time. Light turned into hierarchy, faith turned into weapon, truth turned into control. Even Earth, in all its innocence, was not spared. He saw glimpses of its future and past, intertwined prophets silenced, teachers deified, compassion buried beneath stone and scripture. The darkness pressed closer until only a single point of light remained, faint but unwavering. The being's voice returned once more, softer now, a whisper carried on eternity itself. But love cannot be destroyed. It can only be forgotten. The garden was gone, the stars extinguished, Yet Daniel sensed that faint light, burning somewhere within himself, the last remnant of a truth too vast to ever truly die. The visions dissolved like mist at sunrise, leaving only the faint hum of silence in their wake. The cabin came back into focus, its walls trembling softly under the assault of distant thunder. The storm had not passed, yet its presence now felt unreal, like sound bleeding through from another dimension. Daniel's body was heavy, his heartbeat erratic, his hands trembling as though they belonged to someone else. The air was charged, metallic, alive with static energy. He could still see fragments of what he had witnessed: violet skies, radiant beings, the garden that shimmered beyond comprehension, flashing behind his eyelids every time he blinked. Doubt crept in like a shadow, reclaiming the light. His mind began to claw for explanation, desperate to anchor itself to something rational. He knew the signs of oxygen deprivation, of hallucinations brought on by exhaustion or stress. He thought of the crash, the lightning, the heat. He could be unconscious right now, lying in the mud, his brain conjuring impossible images in its final flickers of life. It would make sense. It had to make sense. He pressed a hand to his temple, trying to slow the swirl of confusion. Every logical framework he had built over a lifetime of medicine and science began to crumble under the weight of what he had seen. The faces of his patients, the deaths he had witnessed, the prayers whispered in sterile rooms, all of it now seemed like fragments of a puzzle he had never understood. Could faith be nothing more than the human brain's response to fear? Was this being merely a hallucination wearing the costume of the divine to comfort him in crisis? The air pulsed once, and the thought was interrupted. A warmth spread across his chest, calm yet commanding. He realized, with a strange and chilling clarity, that the being could hear his thoughts, not through language, but through resonance, like an echo finding its way back to the source of sound. A voice emerged, not in the room, not in his ears, but inside the center of his being. Faith is not belief without proof. It is remembering what you already knew before birth. The words struck him with the weight of inevitability. They did not demand understanding. They carried it. He felt the meaning unfold through sensation rather than logic. Faith was not ignorance, not blind devotion, but memory. The knowing that existed before words, before form, before flesh. The being was not answering doubt with argument, but dissolving it by revealing its origin. The walls of the cabin seemed to breathe again, the light shifting from gold to soft white. Daniel's skepticism began to melt under the enormity of what he felt. The truth was not in what he saw, but in the resonance that filled him. He realized the human mind sought proof through eyes and hands, but what he was experiencing existed beyond either. Proof, in this place, was not evidence, it was recognition. Still, a fragment of resistance remained. He was a man of medicine, of procedure, and observation. He needed boundaries, constants, measurable things. And yet here, none of those laws applied. He had spent his life surrounded by death, believing it to be the final limit of the measurable world. But now, faced with a consciousness that seemed to move through dimensions like water, his old faith in reason, in science, was beginning to tremble. He looked at the being again, and for an instant, it was as though the boundaries of his perception stretched. The creature was not one shape, but many, overlapping layers of light and form, all existing simultaneously. It was both dying and eternal, both here and elsewhere. Daniel's pulse steadied, not because he understood, but because he began to sense that understanding was the wrong pursuit. The voice returned once more, quieter now, but deeper. You remember more than you realize. You have carried the truth through lifetimes, through flesh, through the illusion of separation. What you call faith is the act of waking up to what has always been. Daniel closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in stillness. The storm outside was deafening now, yet within him there was quiet, a silence so complete it felt alive. The doubt had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed. It was no longer resistance. It was reverence for the incomprehensible, the awareness that the universe might be far greater than even belief itself could contain. The storm outside the cabin had softened into a low, rhythmic murmur, like the world itself was trying to remember how to breathe. The air within the room shimmered faintly, as if the light had texture, moving in invisible waves that bent the space between seconds. Daniel sat motionless beside the cot, his heartbeat caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. The being's glow had faded into a cool radiance, no longer blinding but steady, like moonlight seen through water. The silence felt alive, charged with expectation. He did not ask its name. The thought had barely formed before the answer began to bloom inside him, spreading through his mind like warmth seeping into frost. The being stirred, its golden eyes reflecting light that had no earthly source. And then, in a voice that was not a sound but a knowing, it spoke into him. Seraphiel. The name carried weight. It was not merely a label but a vibration, a frequency that seemed to reach beyond language into the roots of meaning. When Daniel heard it, he did not translate it, he remembered it. It was as though the syllables had been sleeping somewhere deep in his consciousness, waiting for the moment to awaken. The air thickened, humming faintly around the sound of it. Seraphiel, a word older than any scripture, carrying the taste of fire and eternity. Images surfaced within his mind, not visions this time, but impressions, echoes of luminous forms moving through the dark fabric of creation, crossing dimensions the human eye could never see. They were not travelers in the way Daniel understood the term. They moved not through space, but through consciousness itself, shifting between layers of reality like a thought passing from dream to waking. I am a traveler between densities of awareness, the voice explained, and the meaning unfolded effortlessly within Daniel's mind. We serve the source. We bring reminders when the message is forgotten. The word source vibrated through him, and for an instant he saw it a vast sea of light with no surface and no depth, from which all things seemed to rise, and to which all things eventually returned. Every soul, every life, every flicker of thought was a ripple within that ocean. Daniel felt both infinitesimally small and impossibly vast, as though his consciousness was being stretched to contain the immensity of what he was being shown. He understood then that Seraphiel was not a single being in the way humans defined individuality. It was a collective consciousness, an emissary of something greater, expressing itself through one form to speak in terms the human mind could bear. The being's eyes, those living suns, held layers within layers, countless reflections of worlds that had forgotten and remembered the same truth across aeons. Daniel's skepticism faltered in the presence of that name. He felt his resistance dissolving like dust beneath an incoming tide. His thoughts were laid bare before Seraphiel, and yet there was no judgment, no intrusion, only recognition, like two fragments of the same consciousness remembering they were never separate. Outside, lightning flickered once more, illuminating the world beyond the window in a brief wash of silver. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw figures in the rain shapes of light moving through the trees, watching silently, their presence neither threatening nor benevolent. They were witnesses, perhaps other travelers, drawn by the same current that had carried Seraphiel here. Then the light faded, and all was quiet again. The voice spoke once more, gentle now, a whisper inside the soul. We come when worlds drift too far from remembrance. We do not save, we remind. Love is the path, but memory is the key. The weight of those words sank into Daniel like gravity, anchoring him in a truth that needed no proof. The being's name, its purpose, its message, all of it coalesced into one realization: that humanity was not abandoned, nor unique, nor forgotten. It had simply fallen asleep in its own creation. And Seraphiel had come not as a god or savior, but as a mirror, to remind it of what it already was. The cabin had become a chamber of light. Though no flame burned and no bulb glowed, it seemed as though the air itself had remembered how to shine. Every object, the wooden walls, the cot, even the rain-soaked floorboards vibrated with a faint luminescence, as if the entire space was being rewritten in energy rather than matter. Daniel could no longer tell where the storm ended and silence began. He sat still, unable to blink, watching Seraphiel's form ripple between clarity and translucence like light refracted through water. The being's presence filled every corner of the cabin, vast yet intimate, immense yet gentle. When it spoke again, it did not speak to Daniel's ears but directly into the rhythm of his thoughts, each word a resonance rather than sound. "Love is not emotion," it said. "It is physics." Daniel felt those words vibrate through him, echoing not as metaphor but as law. Seraphiel's light pulsed softly, and with every pulse, the world around them seemed to respond. Raindrops slowed their fall. The boards beneath Daniel's feet trembled faintly. The air thickened with harmonic motion. "All that exists," the voice continued, "is frequency. Every particle, every breath, every dream. Consciousness is the field, and love is the resonance that binds it together." The meaning unfolded within Daniel. Bypassing analysis, he saw atoms not as tiny solids but as symphonies of vibration. He saw life not as separate entities but as notes in one infinite chord. He understood, suddenly, that every act of cruelty, every moment of isolation, was not moral failure, it was dissonance, a fracture in the harmony that holds existence in balance. "Your species confuses love with feeling," Seraphiel said, and the light around its form brightened. "But love is not sentiment, it is alignment. When one consciousness remembers its true frequency, others nearby begin to vibrate in unison. This is why he healed." The name did not need to be spoken, yet Daniel felt it echo in his chest nonetheless. Yeshua. The sound of it carried across every cell in his body, unlocking a pulse he had never noticed before, a rhythm beneath his heartbeat. Older than life itself, the being's voice deepened, no longer a whisper but a current moving through space. He did not perform miracles, he remembered the pattern. Images flashed through Daniel's mind, not of the man history had depicted, but of light bending around form. He saw hands placed upon the sick, but what moved was not flesh. It was frequency, realigning frequency. He saw eyes opened not by divine command, but by resonance restored. Yeshua had not broken the laws of the universe, he had remembered them. Seraphiel's radiance flared brighter, and Daniel felt his consciousness expanding outward, as if every atom within him recognized the same vibration. He realized that the law of frequencies was not distant or mystical, it was immediate, woven into the smallest gesture of kindness, into the quiet recognition that one being's existence affirmed another's. Love was not abstract, it was mechanical, cosmic, measurable through the pulse of creation itself. The light dimmed again, settling into the rhythm of breath. The cabin returned to stillness, though the silence now felt alive. Seraphiel's presence softened, no longer vast but close, like a whisper between worlds. He remembered the pattern. The voice said once more, slower this time, like a truth too sacred to rush. "And so can you." Daniel sat motionless, the words sinking into him like gravity. He thought of every moment he had witnessed death, every hand he had held as life slipped away. Perhaps, he realized, they had not vanished, they had only changed resonance, crossing from one frequency to another. The boundary between life and death, matter and spirit, might not be a wall at all, but a shift in sound. For the first time, Daniel did not question. He only listened to the faint vibration in the floor, to the pulse within his chest, to the strange, harmonic hum that seemed to rise from the very fabric of the air. Somewhere beyond comprehension, the universe was still singing, and love was its song. The silence after Seraphiel's words was deeper than any quiet Daniel had ever known. It was the kind of silence that seemed to breathe, vast and conscious, holding the weight of unspoken truths. Outside, the storm had receded to a distant murmur, its echoes blending with the steady rhythm of rain dripping from the cabin roof. The air shimmered faintly, dense with invisible vibration, as if every particle were listening. Daniel could feel it in his bones, the universe waiting for the next question. It came unbidden, rising from the oldest part of him, the part that had knelt beside death too many times to keep pretending it was ordinary. He asked, not aloud but in thought, what every mortal heart eventually whispers into darkness. What happens when we die? The question lingered like smoke, and Seraphiel's golden eyes dimmed, their brilliance softening into pale amber. When it finally spoke, its voice was slower, quieter, filled with the gravity of something that had been said countless times yet never truly heard. You return to frequency. Daniel felt the words rather than understood them. They sank through his awareness, unfolding like waves through still water. Seraphiel's glow flickered once, and the air vibrated in response. You do not end, it continued. You shift. Images began to form within Daniel's mind, not of bodies or souls, but of vibration. He saw consciousness as light trapped in varying densities, each pulse a fragment of the universal song. When the physical vessel ceased, the melody did not stop, it simply changed pitch, ascending or descending according to the resonance it had cultivated through life. Your species fears this transition, the being said, and a trace of sorrow moved through its tone. You have forgotten the continuity of existence. To soothe that fear, you built heavens and hells, stories of reward and punishment. But in truth, there is only harmonization or dissonance. Daniel watched as the vision deepened. He saw spirits not rising or falling through imagined realms, but vibrating, some smoothly, their tones blending with higher frequencies, others jagged, discordant, unable to merge. The harmonious ones flowed effortlessly toward the source, merging with the great field of light. The dissonant ones lingered in lower vibrations, lost in the echo of their own fear, not damned but simply unresolved. The being's light pulsed as if in rhythm with the universe itself. Heaven and hell are not places, it whispered. They are conditions of resonance. When you live in alignment with love, the true frequency of creation, you harmonize. When you cling to fear, to guilt, to separation, you dissonate. And when the body falls away, you return to the frequency you have become. The simplicity of it struck Daniel with quiet terror. It meant there was no external judge, no celestial gate, no throne waiting beyond the veil. Salvation and damnation were self-created patterns. The afterlife was not architecture but music. Every thought, every act, every intention composed a note in the soul's song. He thought of all the dying he had witnessed, all the eyes that had searched his for reassurance in their final moments. Perhaps the peace on some faces had been harmony restored, while others, lost in panic or bitterness, had slipped into dissonance. Seraphiel's glow softened further, the golden light now barely more than a whisper of warmth in the air. Death is not punishment, it said. It is recalibration. You are never unmade. You are only retuned. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, a sound so low and resonant that it seemed part of the same revelation. Daniel sat in stillness, realizing that every life, every choice, was part of a grand composition playing endlessly through creation. The human heart was both instrument and musician, shaping its destiny through the music it remembered or refused to hear. And for the first time, Daniel understood that death was not an ending, It was the universe tuning itself back into harmony. The air around the cabin deepened again, thick with light that carried weight. Every particle seemed suspended, waiting, as if the world itself leaned forward to listen. Seraphiel's radiance pulsed once, and Daniel felt it ripple through his bones like the vibration of a great unseen bell. The being's eyes glowed brighter than before, the gold burning with a strange sadness, a light that remembered. When it spoke, the words did not sound as speech but as memory made audible, the voice of something that had lived through the birth of galaxies and the fall of entire worlds. He volunteered. The phrase entered Daniel's consciousness like a chord struck in a forgotten key. It carried the gravity of sacrifice, but not of tragedy. Seraphiel's image flickered, showing something vast beyond itself. Yeshua did not arrive as savior, nor as punishment sent by an authority. He came as correction. The images returned, flooding Daniel's mind in waves. He saw the early universe as sound and color, a field of perfect resonance spreading through endless darkness. Every star, every consciousness, moved in synchrony, each tone woven flawlessly into the great composition of creation. But then came the dissonance, the first spark of separation. In the freedom of choice, some notes began to play out of rhythm. The harmony that once bound all things began to fracture. It was not rebellion or evil, Seraphiel explained, but curiosity that forgot its origin. Free will was a gift, but when wielded without remembrance of unity, it became chaos. Worlds that once sang together began to drift apart. Civilizations turned inward, creating gods in their own image. Even light itself dimmed in certain corners of existence, trapped within its own frequency, unable to rise. Into that imbalance, a volunteer stepped forward. Daniel felt the enormity of it as if the universe itself inhaled. A being of vast awareness, one who remembered the original frequency, chose to descend to compress infinite light into the fragile rhythm of flesh. He, Yeshua, offered himself to recalibrate the field, Seraphiel said. And Daniel saw it, a consciousness folding itself through dimensions until it became a heartbeat. He witnessed the descent, not as mythology but as physics, the law of vibration collapsing into matter, a frequency so pure it resonated through every form it touched. When that light took on human shape, the dissonance around it began to waver. Wherever he walked, balance followed. Wherever he spoke, the field realigned. He was not performing miracles, he was restoring the pattern. Then Daniel saw the moment of death, the crucifixion, not as horror, but as resonance reaching its peak. The body's suffering was the release of energy back into equilibrium, a recalibration through pain. When the final breath escaped, it did not vanish, it rippled outward through all dimensions, harmonizing what had fallen apart. Seraphiel's voice deepened with the memory. His death was not punishment. It was physics, a universal correction written in flesh. The vision lingered, showing the aftermath. Across worlds, across civilizations, consciousness stirred. Species on distant planets felt the same shift, a moment when the great chord of existence tuned itself again to the original key. The crucifixion had not been an event for one world, but a resonance across all creation. Seraphiel's light dimmed, the glow softening until only the eyes remained. He came to remind every form that love is not emotion, nor mercy. It is balance. The rain outside had stopped completely, and the silence that followed was not empty but charged, humming faintly, as though the earth itself remembered the sound of that correction. Daniel sat frozen, the magnitude of what he had seen too vast for words. He finally understood that the story of Yeshua was not only the story of one man or one faith, it was the physics of redemption, a moment when the universe healed itself through the act of remembrance. And in that small cabin, surrounded by shadows and stormlight, Daniel realized that every life, every choice, every breath was part of that same recalibration, the eternal process of love, tuning the cosmos back toward harmony. The night pressed close around the cabin, heavy and absolute. The storm had long passed, leaving behind an air too still for comfort, as though the sky itself had paused in reverence. Inside, Daniel could hear his own breathing mingled with the soft vibration that emanated from Seraphiel's form, a frequency both heard and felt, threading through the air like the hum of invisible machinery older than the stars. The being raised one hand, its long, luminous fingers unfolding with deliberate grace. Resting in its palm was something that did not belong to this age or this world. It was small, no larger than a splinter, yet it pulsed faintly, each rhythm releasing a whisper of golden light. The fragment looked like burnt wood, blackened at the edges. But within its core, a brilliance lived, a light not reflected but remembered. The glow was ancient, reverent, resonant. Seraphiel's eyes softened as it tilted its hand, letting the fragment hover weightlessly above its palm. This remembers him. The voice entered Daniel's consciousness. This fragment carries the vibration of one who recalibrated worlds. Daniel felt his breath catch as the air around the fragment began to ripple, bending the light in concentric waves. Seraphiel's voice grew deeper, resonating through the structure of the cabin itself. It was there, on your hill called Golgotha. The word struck him with the gravity of history and the immediacy of revelation. The hill, an image buried in centuries of faith, rose in his mind not as symbol, but as place. He saw it then, not through memory or imagination, but through resonance. The sky over Golgotha burned in shades of bronze and crimson. The air was heavy with frequencies of grief and awe. The wood of the cross trembled with each heartbeat of the man upon it, absorbing not just his pain, but the vibration of his surrender. Every cell, every atom of that wood had recorded the energy of the moment when balance was restored through sacrifice. Seraphiel's light flared brighter, and Daniel felt time collapse. The fragment in the being's hand pulsed faster, and within it, Daniel sensed layers, recordings of emotion, of resonance, of frequencies once human but now eternal. Matter remembers, the voice continued. Every particle retains the vibration of the event it witnesses. This piece of wood absorbed his frequency at the moment of realignment. It has never stopped singing since. The fragment rose higher, rotating slowly in the air. Daniel could hear it now, not with his ears, but through his bones. A hum so soft it resembled prayer. It was not a sound of mourning, nor of worship, but of completion. The same hum, Seraphiel explained, can still be felt in every corner of creation, though humanity has forgotten how to listen. It is not holy because of belief, the being said. It is holy because of resonance. Daniel felt tears forming, not from sorrow but from recognition. The fragment's light seemed to speak directly to his soul, reminding him of something that predated his life. He understood that holiness was not about the relic, not about the cross, but about what it remembered the moment love tuned itself back into the universe. Seraphiel lowered its hand, and the fragment drifted downward like an ember from a dying fire. When it touched the wooden floor, the glow dimmed but did not fade completely. The world has forgotten this frequency, the voice whispered, its tone tinged with mourning. It still vibrates through you, through every heartbeat, through every breath that chooses love over fear. But few remember the pattern anymore. Outside, the last echo of thunder rolled across the horizon like a closing benediction. Daniel looked at the fragment resting near his feet, still glowing faintly through the shadows. He understood, then, that the relic was not a symbol of suffering, but a key, a remnant of harmony forged in the moment when divinity chose to feel mortality. The wood had not died. It had become a witness to eternity, still humming softly in the language of light. The fragment's faint light began to pulse faster, as though responding to an invisible summons. Daniel felt the air in the cabin grow denser, trembling with low resonance that stirred the dust and made the wooden walls groan. Seraphiel's gaze lifted toward nothingness, and with it, the room itself began to dissolve. The timber, the cot, the rain all fell away into a sound too deep to be heard. A vibration so pure that sight and sense folded into one continuous awareness. When Daniel opened his inner eyes, he was no longer in the cabin. He stood in the heart of memory itself, an expanse of light and shadow that moved as though alive. The horizon pulsed in gold and crimson, the sky trembling like torn fabric, stitched together by lightning that hummed with intelligence. The wind carried a single frequency, a low and endless chord that resonated through his bones. It was not the sound of suffering. It was the sound of recalibration. He saw the hill, but not as any human eye had seen it. Golgotha rose from the earth not as a landscape, but as a convergence of energy lines of light drawn from every direction of the cosmos, intersecting at a single point where flesh met eternity. The cross was not wood but structure, a tuning fork of creation trembling under divine pressure. And upon it, the figure of Yeshua shone like a prism of broken light. His form flickered between human and infinite, between agony and brilliance. Daniel watched in awe as the energy around the figure thickened, a field of rippling distortion that drew all things toward it, air, matter, even thought. Every heartbeat, every particle within miles aligned to the vibration emanating from that center. He saw atoms vibrating faster, stones glowing faintly, dust turning into shimmer. He felt his own consciousness stretch, as though the same frequency passed through him too. Seraphiel's voice moved through the vision, not as sound but as gravity pressing against the soul. "He did not die for sins," it said, its tone calm and absolute. "He died into you." The meaning of those words shattered everything Daniel had ever believed. He understood then that the crucifixion was not a transaction, not an offering to appease a deity, but a transformation emerging. The divine did not demand blood, it entered it. The death was not sacrifice but immersion, the infinite folding itself into the finite so that separation could never again be complete. Daniel saw it unfold across dimensions. The energy released from that moment traveled outward like ripples through still water, touching worlds beyond human reach. Planets, stars, and life forms in distant galaxies felt the same tremor. It was not confined to Earth's sky. Every atom that had ever existed remembered the vibration, the precise frequency of love restoring equilibrium to existence. He could feel it in himself now, the echo of that resonance, still humming through human blood, an inheritance carried unconsciously through every heartbeat. The memory of divine unity, disguised as mortal life. "He died into you," Seraphiel repeated, and Daniel felt it, an awakening, a rejoining. The light from the crucifixion flared, so bright that for an instant the entire cosmos was visible within it. Galaxies spun through the wound in the sky like sparks drawn toward gravity. The field around Yeshua collapsed inward, then exploded outward in a burst of radiance that transcended time. The hill, the cross, the flesh all dissolved into pure frequency. There was no death, only return. When the vision dimmed, Daniel found himself trembling, not from fear, but from awe. The truth was unbearable in its simplicity. The crucifixion was not an ending, nor a symbol of guilt. It was the recalibration of consciousness itself. The universe remembering how to harmonize through love. Every atom, every creature, every heartbeat since that moment carried within it the same resonance, a quiet reminder that divinity had never left creation. It had entered it forever. The vision faded slowly. Like the tide receding from a shore, it had forever changed. The cabin reassembled around Daniel piece by piece, the walls flickering back into existence as though drawn from memory rather than matter. The storm outside was gone, replaced by a silence so deep that it seemed to stretch into eternity. The fragment on the floor no longer glowed. yet the air still pulsed faintly with the aftershock of what he had seen. Seraphiel remained before him, though its form now appeared softer, less defined, as if it were dissolving back into the light it came from. Daniel's body trembled with exhaustion, but his mind burned with clarity. The crucifixion's energy still echoed through him, vibrating quietly behind every heartbeat. It was as if the universe itself had left a residue inside his chest, a memory that did not belong to him yet had always been there. Seraphiel's golden eyes dimmed, and the being leaned closer, its presence vast but tender. The air around it shimmered as the final revelation began to unfold, not as words, but as undeniable knowing. The greatest lie humanity told was that you are separate from him. The words rang through Daniel like thunder wrapped in silk. They carried no accusation, only sorrow. He felt the truth of them ripple through every fragment of his being. The lie had been humanity's inheritance, the belief in distance, in division, in the endless yearning to reach what was never lost. The image of Yeshua on the cross returned, not as a distant figure of worship, but as reflection. The being's presence deepened the revelation. "You are the continuation of the incarnation," it said. Daniel's breath caught. The words did not speak of reverence but of responsibility. Every human life was an extension of that divine embodiment, a living echo of the same light that had once taken form to restore balance. Yeshua's descent into flesh had not been a singular event in history, but the beginning of an unending chain, each soul born thereafter a spark of that same source, carrying within it the vibration of divinity. Humanity was not the audience of salvation. It was the vessel of it. Seraphiel's voice grew quieter, though its resonance filled the room. "You keep waiting for him to return," it said, but he never left. He became you. The being's radiance flickered, and Daniel saw faces in the light, millions of them, every expression of kindness, every sacrifice, every tear shed in compassion. Each face was a reflection of the same energy he had seen on that hill, repeating the same miracle across generations. Love, multiplied through form. Every act of love is resurrection. The words landed like fire upon water, spreading light through the darkness of Daniel's doubt. He understood now that resurrection was not confined to the body or the tomb. It was the rekindling of divine vibration each time one being reached toward another in understanding, forgiveness, or mercy. Every moment of empathy reignited the same frequency that had once bridged heaven and earth. He felt his own heartbeat aligning with that pulse, steady and strong, as if Seraphiel's truth had tuned him back to the original harmony. He saw the long lineage of human struggle not as failure, but as memory in progress, the slow awakening of a species that had forgotten it was sacred. Seraphiel's form began to dissolve fully now, the outlines melting into the luminous air. Its voice came one final time, no longer separate but everywhere at once. "You are not the echo of creation. You are creation remembering itself. Each time you choose love, the universe resurrects through you." The light swelled, filling the cabin until there was no boundary between matter and radiance. Daniel could no longer distinguish his body from the air, his thoughts from the silence. The revelation sank into him like breath returning after drowning. Humanity had never fallen from grace, it had simply closed its eyes. And every act of love was another eyelid opening, another sunrise breaking through the long night of separation. As the glow faded and the world returned, Daniel found himself weeping, not from fear, but from recognition. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly whole. The being was gone, but its truth remained a vibration woven into the fabric of his soul. And in that quiet aftermath, he understood. The divine was not waiting beyond the stars. It was breathing through every heart that still dared to love. The light within Seraphiel began to unravel, folding in upon itself like silk burning in reverse. The golden brilliance that had filled the cabin faded to a softer radiance, scattering into the air as countless motes of living light. Each photon shimmered as if reluctant to leave, hovering around Daniel in slow spirals. It was not disintegration, it was transformation, the return of energy to its source. The boundaries of Seraphiel's form dissolved until only the outline of a presence remained, still vast, still infinite, but no longer anchored in shape. Daniel's chest ached with sudden fear. He felt the pull of finality in the air, that aching gravity of farewell. He wanted to speak, to stop the dissolution, to reach for what was slipping away. His voice broke into the thick silence, though no sound truly left his lips. The plea was made through the language of the heart. He wanted to help, to keep this being tethered to the fragile world that had, for one night, remembered eternity. The response came as warmth moving through him, soft and absolute. "You already have," the voice whispered, "not from the air, but from within. You remembered." The words were simple, but they carried the density of galaxies. They did not praise nor console. They completed something. In that instant, Daniel understood what Seraphiel meant. This encounter had never been about saving, proving, or converting. It had been about remembrance, the act of awakening what had always existed inside him. Every word, every vision, every revelation had been a mirror held up to humanity's sleeping divinity. He had not learned something new. He had recognized something ancient. The photons that had once formed Seraphiel's body began to drift outward, filling the cabin until everything, walls, floor, air, was touched by light. The stillness grew deeper, until Daniel felt as though even his heartbeat had synchronized with something beyond time. Then came the sound, so faint it seemed less like hearing and more like realization, a quiet singing, the harmony of existence itself. It rose from nowhere and everywhere at once, a chorus beyond the range of ears, made of frequencies rather than voices. It was not song in the human sense, but resonance, the language of creation remembering itself. Each note carried layers: sorrow, joy, birth, death, and the endless motion between them. Daniel could feel the music, not with his body, but with his consciousness. It flowed through him, pulling tears from his eyes without pain. It was the same vibration he had felt in the vision of the crucifixion, the same pulse of life that bound every star, every breath, every heartbeat across all worlds. The music grew softer until it became indistinguishable from silence, and then he realized that they were the same thing. In that silence, Daniel felt Seraphiel's essence move through him, one last time, a farewell not spoken but understood. "When you love, I exist." The light dimmed. The photons scattered into the air, passing through the cabin walls and vanishing into the night beyond. Daniel was alone, yet it did not feel like absence. The air was alive with memory, vibrating faintly with the residue of divinity. The world outside seemed sharper now, the colors deeper, the silence more articulate. He could still sense that faint, eternal chord running through everything, the whisper of creation's own breath. He sat in stillness for what could have been minutes or centuries. Somewhere far above, the stars blinked awake through the thinning clouds, each one pulsing with the same golden hue that had once filled the room. Daniel finally understood that the universe itself was the choir, that Seraphiel had not vanished, but had returned to its song. And now, whenever he listened closely enough, beneath the hum of the world and the rhythm of his own heart, he could still hear it, the music of the cosmic silence, forever singing itself back into being. The forest was not dark, it was emptied. The light that had once pulsed from the wreckage was gone, and with it, the rhythm that had tethered Daniel's senses to something larger than himself. The silence that followed was unnatural, deeper than absence, the kind that made the air itself seem to vanish. Even the rain had stopped. He could no longer hear the wind in the trees or the distant rumble of the storm that had birthed this night. The world stood still, as though every living thing held its breath. The craft that had burned so brightly minutes before was now a blackened silhouette, the glow extinguished completely. Its surface was cold, matte, without reflection. What had seemed alive, breathing, humming, was now a hollow carcass of metal and memory. The hum that had once resonated in Daniel's bones was replaced by an eerie quiet that pressed against his skull until it felt almost painful. He took a single step toward the wreckage, and the sound of his movement seemed too loud, out of place in the stillness. Then the weight of it all struck him. The exhaustion, the enormity of what he had seen, the impossibility of it. His knees buckled, and he collapsed beside the remains of the craft. The ground was cold and slick with rain, the soil clinging to his hands as he tried to steady himself. His heart thundered in his chest, a drum of panic and disbelief, the only sound left in the universe. Every beat reminded him that he was still here, still alive, still anchored to the small, fragile rhythm of humanity, while everything else around him felt impossibly infinite. He pressed his palm to his chest and felt the pulse echoing through his body, steady but wild. And in that moment he realized how small that sound was compared to the cosmic song he had heard before. Yet, somehow, it was the same. The heartbeat and the hum were not separate things, they were reflections. Microcosm and macrocosm. His pulse was the echo of the source, the vibration Seraphil had spoken of, the signature of life remembering its origin. The exhaustion overtook him like a tide. His body, overwhelmed by the night's revelations, surrendered. His consciousness drifted into the edges of sleep, where light and sound no longer had boundaries. He dreamt without dreaming, floating through the residue of what had been faces of light, waves of color, a voice whispering through the static of memory. "You already have." The words came again, faint as the last flicker of a dying star. When Daniel woke, the air was no longer thick with mystery. Dawn had broken. The light was pale and innocent, cutting through the trees in gentle shafts that caught the dew clinging to the leaves. Birds were singing again, cautious and unaware of what had transpired hours before. The world had reset itself. He sat up slowly, his clothes stiff with dried mud, his body aching. The crater was still there, but smaller now, its edges softened as though time had already begun to erase it. The craft was gone. Not dismantled, not destroyed, simply gone, as though it had never existed. The clearing looked ordinary, unremarkable, except for one detail: the faint, lingering scent of ozone. It hung in the air like the ghost of a storm, sharp and metallic, whispering of electricity that had passed through both sky and soul. Daniel looked around, his eyes tracing every inch of the clearing, half expecting the being to reappear, to speak, to confirm that it had not all been illusion. But there was nothing. Only the hum of insects beginning their morning chorus, and the slow warmth of sunlight crawling across his skin. Yet, deep within him, beneath thought and fear and reason, the resonance remained. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with memory, the echo of a frequency he now carried within. He stood slowly, one hand still over his heart, listening. Beneath the noise of the waking forest, he could hear it faintly, the rhythm that had once filled the cosmos. It beat not in the ground, not in the air, but within him. The same pulse that had guided creation, the same vibration Seraphil had named love, the heartbeat of the universe, hidden inside the fragile cage of flesh, waiting for the world to remember. The world had returned to its rhythm, but Daniel no longer belonged to it in the same way. Days passed like drifting mist, the edges of time soft and uncertain. He went through the motions of his old life, unlocking the door to his small home, rinsing the mud from his boots, setting the kettle on the stove, but everything felt like imitation. The silence he had carried from the forest followed him, not as emptiness, but as presence, an invisible hum beneath every sound. The air itself seemed to move differently around him, aware of his awareness. It began one night as he sat at the kitchen table, hands folded under the dim yellow light. His fingers trembled slightly, though from neither fear nor cold. The memory of Seraphiel lingered there, golden eyes, the whisper that had dissolved into light, the silence that sang. He rubbed his hands together, and that was when he saw it. Faint at first, like the reflection of candlelight beneath his skin, a thread of gold glimmered along his veins. It pulsed softly, synchronized with his heartbeat. He thought it was exhaustion or trick of the eyes, a remnant of what he had seen in the woods. But as the light strengthened, he felt something else, warmth spreading through him, subtle but undeniable. The glow beneath his skin faded whenever he tried to force it, but returned when he was still. When his mind fell quiet, it was not power, it was recognition. The next day, at the hospice, he noticed it again. A patient named Eleanor was crying softly, her breathing shallow, her hands clutching the sheets as if refusing the inevitable. Daniel sat beside her, taking her trembling hand in his. The room was cold, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. He whispered nothing, only allowed silence to fill the space between them. Within moments, the faint gold light flickered beneath his veins, and he felt the hum again, that low frequency moving through his chest and into his palm. Eleanor's grip loosened, her breathing steadied. The lines of pain across her face softened, replaced by something resembling peace. He withdrew his hand, startled, but she smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you," before slipping into quiet sleep. The glow beneath his skin dimmed once more, as though its work was done. That night, alone in his room, he tested it. He closed his eyes and spoke into the silence, not as prayer but as listening. The response was immediate. The air began to vibrate, faintly at first, then deep enough to make the window glass hum. He could feel the vibration in his lungs, in the floor beneath him, in the stillness itself. It wasn't words or visions this time, it was awareness, a connection without shape or sound. He wondered then, not with fear but with reverence, whether Seraphiel had left something behind. Not a fragment of matter or technology, but a frequency, an inheritance encoded into his very cells. He remembered the being's final words, the quiet affirmation that love was not an idea but a vibration, that faith was remembrance. Perhaps he had not been chosen. Perhaps he had only been retuned. The faint luminescence beneath his skin became a private secret, visible only in darkness, shimmering when he was near suffering or silence. It pulsed not as power but as reminder. When he placed his hands over his heart, he could feel it echoing deeper than blood, resonating with something eternal. Daniel no longer prayed to something beyond. He listened inward, to the pulse that hummed beneath thought, the heartbeat that mirrored the rhythm of creation. The gold light answered in kind, subtle but alive, and he understood with quiet certainty that Seraphiel had not vanished at all. The being had returned to its source, but that source was not far away. It lived within him, within everyone, hidden just beneath the skin, waiting for those who remembered how to see. Months passed, but the night in the woods never truly ended. It lingered behind Daniel's eyes, like a second sunrise that never faded. Life resumed its rhythm around him, but the rhythm was slower now, deeper. Every sound seemed to hold echoes of something more, the rustle of trees outside his window, the hum of machines in the hospice, the heartbeat that never quite matched the silence anymore. He carried on as he always had, yet something within him remained slightly detached, listening for something the rest of the world could not hear. At first, he thought it was imagination. Dreams began to visit him again, not chaotic or fragmented like ordinary dreams, but soft, coherent, luminous. In them, he stood within endless horizons of gold and shadow, and though he never saw Seraphiel, he felt its presence quiet, patient, waiting. Each time he woke, The same phrase lingered in his mind, not as language, but as pulse. Love is not belief, it's memory. The words haunted him gently, repeating themselves through the quiet corners of daily life. He heard them in the hum of the refrigerator late at night, in the gentle rattle of wind against the window pane, even in the space between his own breaths. The world seemed to whisper it to him, not in voice, but in vibration. He realized that Seraphil's lesson had never truly ended. It had simply moved inward, taking residence in the silence where words lose meaning. One evening, as he stood at the foot of a patient's bed, the truth of that phrase revealed itself again. The woman was dying thin, fragile, her body already retreating from the weight of the world. Machines murmured softly around her, the sterile air heavy with the scent of antiseptic and fading time. She was afraid, whispering fragmented prayers into the void, as though begging to be remembered. Daniel took her hand gently, feeling the faint warmth of life still pulsing through her. He said nothing. Words, he had learned, belonged to the surface world. Beneath them existed something older, something that required no sound. As he closed his eyes, he felt the hum begin again, deep in his chest, faint as an afterthought. The golden shimmer returned under his skin, soft and invisible to anyone else. The air shifted calm, rhythmic, alive. The woman's breathing slowed. Her eyes, once frantic, softened into stillness. For the first time in days, she smiled. Daniel opened his eyes and saw peace replace terror, not as miracle, but as memory returning. He understood then what Seraphil had meant. Love was not something to earn or worship. It was the vibration of origin itself. Every being carried it like an ancient song written into the marrow. To remember it was to awaken, to dissolve the illusion of separation, to return home. Word of his calm presence spread quietly through the hospice. Families asked for him when their loved ones began to slip away. They said he made the rooms feel lighter, that the air itself seemed to sigh when he entered. He never spoke of what he had seen, never told anyone about the night the sky fell open, or the being who had burned like truth in his presence. But in the quiet moments, when death hovered close and hearts trembled on the edge of surrender, he would simply be there, silent, grounded, a vessel of the frequency that never left him. Sometimes, when the last breath left a body and the room grew still, he could hear it faintly in the air again, the whisper that bridged the living and the eternal. Love is not belief, it's memory. The words would ripple through him like the faint echo of the divine, and he would close his eyes, letting the vibration pass through him into the silence. And in that stillness, Daniel understood that Seraphil had never truly gone. The being's voice lived within every quiet hum, every exhale, every fleeting heartbeat between life and what followed. It was not a message from the heavens, but a reminder from within the fabric of existence itself. Every time he helped another soul find peace, the whisper returned, not as instruction, but as confirmation that remembering was enough. The message had not ended. It had simply found a new instrument through which to sing. The notebook lay open on the table beside the window, its pages filled with looping handwriting that seemed to fade between sentences, as though ink itself struggled to contain what Daniel had seen. He had written in fragments at first, trying to capture what could not be captured: the light, the hum, the silence that sang. Over time, his words grew steadier, shaped not by fear or disbelief, but by quiet acceptance. The pages were not meant to convince or prove. They were memory translated into form, vibration turned to language, one last attempt to hold the ineffable before letting it go. Outside, the woods waited. The same ridge that had once burned with falling light now stood still beneath a sky of dull silver. The air smelled of rain and earth, the scent that comes just before transformation. Daniel sat for a long time watching the mist curl through the trees. His heartbeat had slowed over the months, not from illness, but from alignment. The gold glow beneath his veins had softened, pulsing faintly now like the residue of a song almost finished. He knew the time had come. Not an ending, but a return to the place where the beginning never truly ended. He closed the notebook gently and ran his hand across its cover, feeling the slight tremor beneath his fingertips. It was as if the words inside were alive, still humming with the same frequency that had passed through him that night in the woods. On the last page, he had written the only sentence that felt complete, the one that carried everything he had learned. He wasn't an alien. He was what we forgot to be. And what he whispered about Jesus' love wasn't doctrine. It was physics. The simplicity of those words belied their weight. He had read them aloud, once, softly, and the air had responded the faint vibration he had come to recognize as acknowledgement. He understood now that Seraphiel had never been from another world. The being was not visitor but mirror, showing him the reflection of what humanity had misplaced in its long obsession with separation. The light he had seen was not from elsewhere. It was what lived inside all things before memory fractured into belief. As night fell, Daniel gathered a few belongings, a coat, a flashlight, the notebook, and stepped outside. The town lay silent behind him, unaware that something eternal had unfolded in their midst. The path to the forest glowed faintly in the moonlight, the same path he had followed months ago when the sky had opened. The air carried a familiar scent of ozone, faint but undeniable. It was waiting for him. Each step into the trees felt lighter than the one before. The sounds of the world crickets, the whisper of wind, the distant rush of water merged into a single low hum. The deeper he went, the stronger the resonance became, until the forest itself seemed to breathe in rhythm with him. He felt the same warmth bloom beneath his skin, the same golden luminescence threading through his veins. It was not power, but permission, a reminder that he had never been abandoned by the light. He had simply learned to remember it. Somewhere deeper within the woods, the stillness changed. The air thickened, vibrating faintly as though a presence was forming, not visible, but felt. The hum of the universe began to rise again, surrounding him like the soft opening of an ancient song. Daniel smiled, not in awe, but in recognition. The silence welcomed him back. He set the notebook down beneath a tree, its pages open to the final line, and let his hand rest on it one last time. The forest glowed faintly as mist gathered around him. He felt his pulse merge with the rhythm in the air, the boundary between heartbeat and cosmos dissolving. His body grew lighter, his breath slower. The light beneath his skin brightened once more, spreading outward until it was impossible to tell where he ended and the world began. When morning came, the woods were quiet again. The ground was undisturbed, save for a single notebook resting among the roots, its pages fluttering gently in the breeze. On the final page, the ink shimmered faintly gold, as if alive, and though no one was there to read it, the vibration of the words remained, humming softly through the air. He wasn't an alien. He was what we forgot to be. And what he whispered about Jesus' love wasn't doctrine. It was physics. And if you listened closely enough, beneath the wind and the whispering leaves, you could almost hear it, the faint, endless hum of remembrance, echoing through everything that had ever lived, waiting for someone else to remember too.